the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, says, guys, you got to get rid of your iPhones because everybody's tracking your iPhones. We got to come up with something primitive and simple so we can communicate with each other. 4,000 of his top guys get these pagers. They order these pagers from Taiwan. Taiwan subcontracts it out to a place in Hungary. Israel takes over the factory in Hungary. Right? And they take every one of these pagers and they inject in it a little bit of explosives that can be triggered remotely. And all of a sudden, 3,000 of these guys have the pagers in their pockets and they all explode. And they've destroyed the whole upper echelon of Hezbollah's military, right? And if that wasn't enough, the next day, they do the same thing with 400 walkie-talkies, right? And then the next day, 12 of the senior Hezbollah leaders are gathering in Beirut to plan a ground attack on the northern Galilee. Should have been catastrophic. Would have been another October 7th. Israel, intercepts the communications, figures out where they are, kills them all, in a missile attack. And now, what we're seeing is that every day, Israel's going in, targeting exactly where their missiles are, where the rockets are. Hezbollah is back on their heels. They have literally, in 2 weeks, completely changed the balance of power between Israel and Hezbollah, to the benefit, by the way, of the entire world. Right. These are all people who have murdered Americans, murdered, Westerners, and Israel's fighting this fight, and they're fighting this fight not with the assistance of America, but in spite of, the recalcitrance of the United States government.
It's a crazy world, crazy world. Somebody's gotta have to save you. It's a crazy world. It's a crazy world. Somebody's gotta have to save you.
Joining me today is the former U.S. ambassador to Israel under President Trump and author of the new book, One Jewish State, The Last Best Hope to Resolve the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. Ambassador David Friedman, welcome back to the Rubin Report.
Thanks, Dave. It's great to be back.
I said that with a slightly depressing tone only because I didn't expect to have you back the second time so quickly and now the third time so quickly, and I suspect I'll have you back a fourth time very quickly. We're taping this, I just want to note at the top, we're taping this towards the end of September. We're obviously going to air this the week of October 7th. There's a lot changing on the ground at the moment. So why don't we do a little bit of sort of what's happening right this moment, and again, some of it certainly will change, probably. But the real issue is something that you actually brought up to me last time we spoke in this studio, which is that the war in the north with Hezbollah is actually sort of the real war, or the big war, as crazy as that might sound to people that aren't that familiar with the area. So can you kind of maybe sum up a little bit of what's going on there? Again, understanding that some of the pieces are going to change.
Well, for starters, Hezbollah is the largest and most lethal terrorist organization in the world. It's the largest army, armed forces among non-state actors. It's right on Israel's border, right up at the border. There have been wars in the past that have created significant damage for Israel, more for Hezbollah. October 7th, Israel was attacked by Hamas. The next day, before Israel even responded, before anyone knew what Israel's response would be, Hezbollah started attacking, and they've been attacking every day since. 8,000 missiles have been fired against northern Israel by Hezbollah out of sympathy for Hamas. Just to show we're with you. Now, they haven't thrown their best stuff at Israel. They've limited the attack to the north, but the consequence of that is almost 100,000 Israeli citizens have been displaced. They're refugees in their own land. And it's been going on for now 11 months, and everybody's saying, this has to stop. How are you going to bring 100,000 people home again and make them feel safe? At the same time, Biden, Blinken, Sullivan, Lloyd Austin, the security echelon in the United States has been demanding that Israel kind of fight back with one hand tied behind its back. So, those of us who know Israel's capabilities are saying, God, this is like they've turned Israel into a punching bag.
How much of this, I actually don't want to spend too much time on the American portion of this, because I think there's more important things to this, but how much is just related to the clear weakness of America, which Biden was, I would say, illustrating while he was still functionally president. I think it's fairly clear he's not functionally president right now.
Look, Israel needs American ammo. They need American diplomatic support, some other military support. So they want to keep America happy, and America's taken advantage by basically handcuffing Israel. And so it has prolonged this conflict, both with Hamas and with Hezbollah, for much longer than it should have. And things started to change really in the past week and a half. And given me and many other people just sort of, I would say, real joy, because we know what Israel's capable of doing, and we know that Israel can fight back. So the first thing they did, after that horrible murder of 12 children playing soccer, Israel was able to target the guy responsible for it, right? Literally in his room, in his apartment, in Beirut, just took him out.
Can you talk for a moment about the community that they actually targeted there? Because those were not Jews.
They weren't Jews.
People don't realize is even a thing.
Right. So 20% of Israel is Arab. And, let's say 18% of that is Muslim and Christian Arab, but a small portion are Druze. And the Druze are really beloved within the state of Israel because they're incredibly patriotic. They serve in the army. They've achieved sort of the highest echelons of government service. And so everyone in Israel loves the Druze. And so these Druze kids who were playing in northern Israel, playing soccer, and a missile came in and killed 12 of them. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, the whole country went into mourning. And so Israel retaliated quickly against the guy. And by this guy Shuker, who they took out, is also one of the guys who planned in 1983 the murder of over 200 American Marines in the Marine barracks in Beirut, as well as killing 60 people within the American embassy in Beirut. So this is a guy who had American blood on his hands. So that was the first sign that Israel was kind of, fighting back. Of course, then they took out the Ismail Haniyeh in Iran, which was an incredible intelligence operation. But then, they took it up a whole nother notch, right? Which is, the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, says, guys, you got to get rid of your iPhones because everybody's tracking your iPhones. We got to come up with something primitive and simple so we can communicate with each other. 4,000 of his top guys get these pagers. They order these pagers from Taiwan. Taiwan subcontracts it out to a place in Hungary. Israel takes over the factory in Hungary, right? And they take every one of these pagers and they inject in it a little bit of explosives that can be triggered remotely. And all of a sudden, 3,000 of these guys have the pagers in their pockets and they all explode. And they've destroyed the whole upper echelon of Hezbollah's military, right? And if that wasn't enough, the next day, they do the same thing with 400 walkie-talkies. Right. And then the next day, 12 of the senior Hezbollah leaders are gathering in Beirut to plan a ground attack on the northern Galilee. Should have been catastrophic. Would have been another October 7th. Israel, intercepts the communications, figures out where they are, kills them all, in a missile attack. And now, what we're seeing is that every day, Israel's going in, targeting exactly where their missiles are, where the rockets are. Hezbollah is back on their heels. They have literally, in 2 weeks, completely changed the balance of power between Israel and Hezbollah. To the benefit, by the way, of the entire world. These are all people who have murdered Americans, murdered, Westerners, and Israel's fighting this fight, and they're fighting this fight not with the assistance of America, but in spite of, the recalcitrance of the United States government.
So there's a couple things there. So first, on the deterrence side, that's really all that anyone responds to in the Middle East, right? And I think that's very hard for Westerners to understand. I mentioned to you as we're taping this right now, just this morning, I heard the British Prime Minister call for a ceasefire. And it's like, well, okay, what would you do if 8,000 rockets were fired into the UK? I mean, maybe at this point the UK would roll over. I don't know. But can you just talk a little bit about that, just the nature of what people are fighting, not what they're fighting for, the nature of how they fight?
Look, Israel has not had a day of peace with its neighbors since 1948. It's still in a state of war with Lebanon. It's still in a state of war with Syria. Not the case with Jordan or Egypt, but two northern countries. It's still in a state of war with Hamas. It's in a state of conflict with the Palestinian Authority, Islamic Jihad. How do they live? How do they become a first world nation? We've been there together, in some of the great places in Israel. I mean, it's a beautiful country. It's a first world country, first world economy, elite universities. How do they do that? Okay, they don't want to go to war every day. If they went to war every day, they couldn't do these things. No. They need deterrence. It's all about deterrence. They need to be feared by their enemies. And when the enemies see that, Joe Biden gets up and says, Bibi's not doing enough to make peace, or the United Nations gets up and criticizes Israel. That's the antithesis of deterrence. That gives these people hope that they can actually defeat Israel. I think for the first time in my lifetime, some of these nations actually felt that they could defeat Israel. They can make it go away. They watch what's happening in America. And all of a sudden, I think, Israel finally said, enough. We're not committing suicide. We're going to go back and restore deterrence. And it's very, very important.
If you're looking for more enlightening conversations about international issues, check out our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.